What is going on today, guys? Hope you guys are doing well. Today's video was actually requested by, I believe his name was Electronics, and he said he was starting off in fuel. He got hired for a fuel hauling position here in the next week. So first off, congratulations to you, man. You're in for an exciting journey, and I hope you enjoy it. And best of luck to you, and keep us posted. But if anyone else wants me to do a video about any specific topic, please let me know in the comment section down below. I'd be, again, happy to do a video about it. But he wanted to know what the most common mistakes within fuel hauling were and how to avoid them, as well as some just general tips. So today we're going to go over that. Now, I'm sure you're going to be going over a lot of this, if not hopefully all of this, and then some in training. You know, whoever trains you should go over all this with you. And depending upon what company you got hired with, they're going to have probably a slightly different way of doing things. But generally speaking, fuel hauling is pretty much the same. So as far as the mistakes that you may or may not make, and hopefully you don't, so the reality is, as far as mistakes within fuel hauling, a vast majority of them are going to be for one or two reasons, or a combination of those two reasons. And what are those two reasons? You're going too fast, and or you're not paying attention. I like to think of the phrase that I had learned in the Army, which is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Meaning, if you just go a little bit slower and pay attention to what you're doing, you're going to be smoother than if you're trying to rush through stuff. And ultimately, if you are smooth because you're going a little bit slower, you're going to be faster than people who try and speed through it anyways, because if you make a mistake, you're going to spend quadruple the amount of time, if not more, trying to fix that mistake that you made than if you just taken an extra 5, 10, or even 20 minutes doing whatever it is that you were doing and paying attention more. With that out of the way, the first thing that I would say is the biggest mistake is don't stand in the way of anything that you're going to open, right? So if you're, for example, if you're going to start to unload something, unload a product, and this also applies to if you're, getting the cap off your hose, don't stand in front of it. Anything that you're going to open, don't stand in front of, because more likely than not, there's pressure of some sort built up behind whatever it is that you're going to open. And in the case of hoses, especially in the summertime, but can happen in the winter too. But in the summertime, what happens is that leftover vapor that is trapped inside the hoses gets built up and heats up, and that builds pressure on each cap at the end of the hose. And when you go to unopen that and you lift those dog ears, as they're called, open, that cap, and this will happen to you, that cap will shoot out. I've seen caps fly 50 feet up in the air because they had that much pressure built up behind them. And so if you take one of those caps to the face, you're not going to be looking too pretty anymore. And if not, get you knocked out or even kills you if it's that much pressure. And then as far as opening things, I'll give a quick story. On my very first day of fuel hauling, I stupidly stood right in front of what's called the load head, where you load all the product into the trailer. And I was starting to unload, but I stood in front of it. I took off the cap of the cover for the load head, and so it was open, and I had my fire valves open, which allows the product to flow down through the load head into the hose, into the tank, but I hadn't connected the hose yet for some reason. I don't remember what exactly I was trying to do or accomplish, but I didn't have the hose connected to the load head yet. After I had taken off the cap, the fire valves, or the internals, whatever you want to call them, were open, and for whatever reason, I decided to lift up and grab lever that opens up the load head and allows product to flow into the hose that should have been there, but wasn't. Even though within a quarter of a second that I hadn't connected the hose yet, it was already too late. I already got a diesel bath. And so the rest of the day, I reeked like diesel. So again, don't stand in front of anything that you're going to open. Stand off to the side. And same thing with the vapor caps on your trailer, because if you open it, regardless of if your fire valves are open or not, there can be some built up pressure in there that can spit out either some gas vapor, usually gas vapor, and that can also get on you and make you reek of gasoline for the rest of the day too. The next biggest thing is quadruple checking all along every single step of the process of loading and unloading that you have what I call the 5 C's, right? That is the correct product in the correct amount, in the correct compartment, going to the correct location, and going into the correct tank at that location. If you just pay attention and you quadruple check everything and you make it a habit to quadruple check everything to the point where it's so redundant, you're going to be okay, and it's going to be pretty hard to make a mistake. So what does that look like? So that means you're showing up to the correct loading facility to begin with, wherever they want you to pull out of. Then you're going to pull into the correct bay, and it's going to vary depending upon the facility. Some bays are only diesel, some bays are only gas. You pull into the correct bay, and you get out of the truck, you connect everything, your scully cord, your vapor hose, the correct loading arms going to the correct tanks for the correct products. And then before you punch in all your numbers on the screen and you start that flow, you verify and you check to make sure which arms are connected to which compartment, because sometimes you'll show up to these loading facilities and the loading arms will be crossed where, arm 1 that should be diesel is behind arm 2 that's going to be gas. And so if you don't pay attention, you can accidentally load gas into the compartment that you are trying to load diesel in, or vice versa. So just look up especially at the facilities where they're very high up. Don't get lazy, look up and visually trace with your finger. Okay, arm 1 is going into compartment 1. Arm 2 is going into compartment 2. That's going to save you a lot of headache, because on one occasion I didn't do that, and I thought I was loading compartment 1 with loading arm 1, but it was actually compartment 1 that was being loaded with arm 2. And so I had to, fortunately, I stopped and I realized what arm was going into what compartment. I stopped everything, and it was diesel, so it didn't really matter for both compartments. And I stopped, I switched them up, and then I continued on the process. So it could have been a costly mistake where I loaded too much product in one compartment, and the sensor that was at the top of the compartment, it would have gone off, and then I would have had to talk to the operator, would have had to talk to my boss at the time, and it would have just been a complete mess. So again, even after you have done everything and you've already checked and you started the process, double check again that you actually did everything correctly, because that can save you, like it did there for me. Same thing, but a different situation at a different loading facility. I had been hauling a 2-compartment trailer for months on end, and the gallons were pretty high, especially for gas. I was loading 4,800 gallons of gas in the front compartment, and 4,200 in the back. And then I switched to a different trailer for the first time. I go to a loading facility. I needed to load gas, and so I didn't double check what trailer I had. And so I loaded the first compartment with 4,800 gallons on the screen, but that front compartment on this trailer that I had switched to only had a capacity for 4,400 gallons. So I would have definitely domed out or probed out, and that would have been a mess. But again, because I double checked what I was doing after the fact to make sure I had done things correctly, I caught it after about 1,000 gallons had already been loaded. I called the operator and I said, hey, I started loading this 85, 10% ethanol into my trailer at, 4,800 gallons, because that's the trailer I was used to. And I realized at the last minute after starting that I had switched to a new trailer and I needed to be at 4,000 gallons instead of 4,800. Is this going to be a problem? And fortunately, again, I lucked out again, because at that specific facility, when they load gasoline, they load the ethanol at the same time. It's injected at the same time as the gasoline. And so if you change the gallons amount mid-load, it's not a big deal, versus at some facilities, at a lot of facilities, they either do the ethanol on the front end, so they load the ethanol first, the 10% ethanol, and then they load the gas, or they do vice versa, and they do the gas first and then the ethanol last. But if that mixture's not correct, you can't put that in a tank. That has to be taken care of somewhere else, because it's a bad load. It's a bad mixed load, because the 10% ethanol is now below or above what it should be in the gas mixture. So double check your work even after the fact. Next biggest thing, if you're not completely sure of what you're doing, stop what you're doing, call somebody. Because again, this goes back to the original concept of, if you stop what you're doing and you call somebody, the time that it takes to do that is going to be way less than it is, and way less of a headache than it is to make the mistake and try and fix it after the fact. So again, when I was with Pilot, we did a third-party gas station, and at Pilot, and same thing at Love's, all your diesel tanks are yellow caps, generally speaking. However, at this third-party gas station that I'd pulled up to deliver diesel at, there was a green lid, which is also usually diesel, and then there was also a yellow lid. I stopped what I was doing. I looked at the yellow tank, and then I looked at the green tank, and then by doing that and slowing down versus getting in a hurry, I realized that the yellow tank at that gas station was actually E85. And so the green tank was the diesel tank, and that was the tank that I dropped into. That kind of ties into the last tip that I have, which is, if you're going to a store that you're not familiar with, that you've never been to, call somebody and ask them about the layout of the store, where the tanks are, how to get in there easily and out of there easily. And then also you can look at Google satellite images. Sometimes it's old pictures, so don't completely rely on that, but make sure to make a call to somebody who's been there before. And then also just go slow. Just go slow like I did at that third-party gas station, and just be cautious of what you're doing, because you have not been there before. That'll save you a big headache from making a mistake. Just a small caveat, you're gonna make mistakes. Hopefully they're not big ones. And if you do everything that your trainer tells you to do, along with these tips and tricks that I've laid out here, you're going to be okay. And again, if you're not sure what you're doing, call somebody immediately, stop what you're doing, and get it figured out. And then continue on after you're sure of what you're doing. Load the correct product in the correct amount, in the correct compartment, go to the correct location, and drop it in the correct tank. Do those 5 things, you're going to be okay. With that being said, if you guys, again, have any other videos that you want me to make about a specific topic, put that in the comment section down below. I'm sure I missed something, so I'm sure some grizzled old fuel hauler who has been doing it for 40 years is going to say, well, I've been doing this since before you were a twinkle in your daddy's eye, boy, and you missed these things. Go ahead, all the old timers that have been doing this far longer than I have been alive, or, even shorter than that, go ahead and put whatever I missed in the comment section down below. This is supposed to be a helpful video, so let's all be helpful here. But if you like this video, please like and subscribe, and I will see you guys on the next one. Take care. God bless.